All right, welcome back to Sociology 1. So we're going to finish up with our discussion of education issues, and then we're going to get into our final set of topics for the semester. We probably won't finish all of that by Thursday, or we'll try to, but we are going to have class on Thursday, and then we'll also have a class session next Tuesday. So I hope you'll be able to come at 10 o'clock next Tuesday, and that's when we'll try to review for the final. And then the final will be online again, so you'll have like a week to do that. All right, so any questions then about what we're up to and what we're doing? All right, so let's just finish with the education issues. We were talking about Traub's what no school can do, and the idea that we're trying to get across is that schools can't solve all the problems that schools face. So this idea that if we just put more money into the schools, that the schools will function better, is one that Traub is skeptical of. It's one that conservatives in general, too, have been skeptical of in our society. And so rather than address the funding inequalities that we started this talk, this whole unit with, these big inequalities, some conservatives have said, well, let's find other ways to improve schools because more funding won't help. And Traub is, in a way, saying a similar thing, that if we only pour more money into the schools, we might not see much movement of the dial. That's how people talk about it in the education world. We have these dials or dashboards of what we're looking at, like completion rates. Are people finishing school more often? Are the inequalities between different races shrinking? Or are things just staying how they were or getting worse? And so when we talk about moving the dial, we're talking about, do our policies, do the things we try to do as a society actually make change in these things that we're trying to measure, and people finishing high school, people going to college, people doing well on tests and things like that. And so he's making the case that a lot of the problems that schools have aren't really just the school's problem. They have to do with interconnectivity. This idea that schools are connected with other institutions in society, and so their functioning is affected by the functioning of the other one. And we talked about different institutions that schools are connected to. And so you're really seeing this functionalist way of seeing the world here. This diagram I'm drawing looks a lot like what's called a schematic. When engineers draw machines or computers or figure out how to get a machine to work, they put it in schematic form and try to figure out what are the inputs to the different parts of the system, how are they affecting each other. And so what affects schools? Families do, but so do neighborhoods. We talked about the media, the economy. If the economy isn't giving any jobs, people aren't gonna believe schools are worth anything. They're gonna try to find making money some other way. So there's all these ways that school functioning isn't just about what the school is doing. We faced this problem a few years back at Yuba College. We have problems with people not finishing, people not persisting. That was a big question we had. Is we have people that start in fall semester and they do great, they get A's and B's, and then we don't see them spring. And we're like, why did that happen? That's a research question. Why did that happen? Where did they go? Why don't they persist? And so we did a study on that, a sociology class I had, a sociology 2 class. We said, let's try to talk to Yuba College students who didn't persist and interview them and ask them, what happened to you? Where'd you go? Why didn't you come back and do your second semester or the next semester? And so we did this. It wasn't that easy to get there. We had to work with the administration here to be able to get access to student numbers that we weren't allowed to see, but we were allowed to call. It's a long story, but the consistent theme, the consistent story that we heard was people saying, it wasn't anything about school. You guys did great. My teachers were great. The library was great. Tutoring was great. The problem was my transportation, or my dad got sick, or we didn't have enough food at home and I needed to go work more, or there was all these basic needs, we could call them, people are facing outside of school that were affecting their ability to do well in school or to even complete it. And so we thought these were important findings. We held a whole forum in town to talk about it, and we invited administrators, and we said, it isn't always just the faculty and what we're doing or not doing that affects students. We're trying to be equitable and make sure everybody can succeed, but if they can't get here because they don't have a car or their internet doesn't work or something like that, then it's hard for us to do our job. So that's what Traub is saying. Schools can't, fix family problems. But we talked about impact, this multi-purpose social service agency. And we were talking about the services that they offer. So things like helping families read to their kids, helps the school do its job better. Giving nutrition services, we talked about, like how, I'm not saying it again because I wrote it the other day, but like helping people feed their kids on a budget so that they're eating healthy food and not just drinking Sunny Delight and stuff like that. Helping people with transportation needs, making sure kids can get to school. A big one is a clinic. I didn't talk about that yet, but a clinic is one of the things Impact provides. And healthcare, access to healthcare is one of the big issues. It was for the students we talked to here. And it is for families because especially in big cities, if your kid gets sick and you don't have good health insurance, what are you supposed to do? You go to the emergency room. And the emergency room in a big city can take a long time to get seen or get through there. And so what a lot of moms do, if it's a single mom typically in a poor urban environment, she might go and take all her kids out of school because one kid is sick and we've got to go to the emergency room and we've got to stay there all day. And so, and I'm not going to be able to pick you up later. So we have all the kids sitting in the emergency room all day long. So the one kid can get seen for their cough and then get prescribed antibiotics. It would have been a lot better if she could just go to the school where the kid goes and get him the antibiotics right there, let her other kids go to school because she didn't have to go to the ER. You solve a lot of problems by making sure she can get basic preventative health care at the school, rather than forcing people to wait until their kids get sick and have to go down to some clinic, down to some ER and wait all day. So the school says we can provide some basic health care right here so people aren't staying out or aren't getting sick in the first place and aren't, missing lots of days of school or work, which also is a thing people face. So, and then transportation after school program, we talked about all those. And so Traub says impact works. So again, what is his data? Well, studies have been done, program evaluation studies, just like we talked about with the reading programs. Do the reading programs help people become literate? Well, some work better than others, as we learned. And same here, you can do a study to see, do the schools that have impact, do they function better? We can look at what we call student learning outcomes. Are they getting better grades? Are they finishing more? Are their test scores going up? Are they completing school and graduating and going to the next level? There's all kinds of what are called metrics, things you can measure on your dial, on your dashboard, and see if things are improving. And so impact works is the point, meaning in all these measures. Schools went up when they had schools got better when they had a multi-purpose social service agency, that's what impact is, on their campus, providing these multiple social services so that people can focus more on the academics. Once they get these services, needs met, basic needs met, they can focus on this higher level thing of thinking and learning and all of that. But there's political resistance. Why haven't we put impact type programs all over the country? If it works, if it helps solve, close these gaps, they're called achievement gaps. If it helps close them, then why don't we put them at more schools? And he says, well, interestingly enough, you get both conservatives and liberals opposing something like this. Why would conservatives oppose something like impact? I mean, things are not as clear politically anymore in America of what is a conservative and what is a liberal. But in classic terms, conservatives are people that don't like to spend government money. They don't like taxes and they don't want to be taxed to have government do stuff. They like to say, conservatives say, whatever happened to personal responsibility? and they will say, you just want to tax and spend, is what conservatives typically say. You're just taxing us, the rich people, and then spending it on those poor people. And they don't think this is fair. They don't think it's actually effective, because if you just give people handouts, they won't learn to do things on their own. So they say we need to encourage personal responsibility. If you want your kids to read, you should be learning how to read and read to them. If you want your kids to, succeed in school, you should be, disciplining them and working with them to make sure they do that. And so they would say, impact sounds nice and all, but I don't think I should be taxed a lot of money to pay for, a clinic and literacy services and nutrition services. Let those people go find those things on their own. That's what they got to do. Well, what about liberals? Why would liberals say, I don't think I like impact? I mean, liberals are people like me and Barack Obama who say, hey, it's a good idea to redistribute the wealth a little bit and make sure that the people who work to make the rich people rich get a little back in the form of things like healthcare and schools and parks and other public things that poor people can't afford on their own. But if you give it to them as a group, they can compete a little better with the rich people. So why not tax the rich a little bit more to make sure that poor kids have good healthcare and good food and things like that, so they can succeed? And so what they say is, well, no, this is the reason they don't like impact is it's too paternalistic. What is paternalistic? Liberals do believe government can play a role in helping people solve problems, but if they act too much, if the government acts too much like a big daddy, paternalistic means acting like your dad. Paternal means father. So when government acts a little too much like big daddy, or big brother was the term they used in 1984, that novel, liberals get worried. They don't want government too involved in people's lives. Here's where, again, the difference between conservatives and liberals gets a little unclear. Conservatives nowadays say they don't want government involvement in people's lives, but they claim that, but at the same time, they're the ones who want to stop abortion, or not allow people to just identify their own gender at school and stuff like that. So conservatives say they don't like government, but if you're wanting to dictate what people do with their uterus or their sexuality and stuff like that, then you are in favor of government control of people. On the other hand, liberals are people that have long said, liberal means liberty. So freedom to vote, freedom to go to school, freedom to, liberty, to improve yourself, to not be a slave of somebody else, but to be free. So liberals have always been the ones that really were against too much involvement by other people in your own life. And in fact, liberals sometimes say government can prevent that. Government can help prevent other people from intervening in your life, like protect your right to your sexuality, or protect your freedom, or freedom of speech and things like that. So but when is it paternalistic? Well, when government is too, like, telling you what you can do with your uterus, or telling you what kind of sexuality you can, have or not. And in this case, where would it be paternalistic? Well, if you're telling women, moms, how they should raise their kids. In other words, if you're having a nutritionist say things like, so what do you feed your kids? Well, beans and rice, just like my mom did, and tortillas. Beans, rice, tortillas, that's a lot of carbs and that's a lot of fattening stuff. You're going to make your kid obese. You shouldn't be giving them tortillas and beans and rice. You should be giving them kale and, quinoa and acai berries and stuff, and then, be like, well, my grandma didn't feed that to my mom, and my mom didn't feed that to me, and that's not what our culture is about. And so it's paternalistic, and there's a long history of this, of, upper middle class social workers telling poor immigrant women, you're not raising your kids right. You got to do it this way, the way we think you should do it. And it's disrespectful. It can be wrong in a lot of cases, because the indigenous knowledge passed down to people is good for them and things like that. So having, some college-educated social worker telling some, working class woman, you're not a good mom, you're not doing it right. It's problematic from a liberal standpoint. Same with, telling people, you're reading the wrong books, or, you're just not treating your kid right. We're gonna kind of take the kid away from you and raise it right. And again, there's a long history of that, of government taking children away from immigrant moms, Native American moms, and raising them and saying, you're just not fit to raise your kid and we're gonna do it for you. So liberals are very sensitive to this idea that our policies, if we're gonna have government help people be free, it shouldn't be something that's taking away people's identity or culture or things like that. So liberals might say this is too in your face, something like impact. It's too interventionist is a term. In a way, it's too interventionist, and another way, it's not enough. They would also say it's ameliorative. I'm giving you some fancy words you might need for grad school, but to ameliorate pain, you might know this if you're a nursing student, sometimes we can't cure people, but we could just try to make them feel better, give them some painkillers or other things so that they don't feel bad. And they are ameliorating the pain. And that's what some liberals might claim about a program like Impact, that if we help a few poor people do a little bit better in life, if we help a few poor people, read to their kids, eat better food, succeed in high school, we'll feel better as a society, like we help some poor people. But did we really solve the problem of poverty? Because if you really look at poverty from like a conflict theory perspective, our capitalist system requires people to be poor. So even if you help some poor people stop being poor, you're gonna have a certain number of people poor because that's what capitalism requires. So you're not really fixing anything or changing anything when you help a few people climb out of poverty, because you're still gonna have this big pool of poverty that's there. And it's gonna have the same number of people in it, probably. So just tinkering with little tweaks here and there, like helping people do better in school, isn't really solving the structural problem of inequality in America, where you've got like some elites controlling all the wealth and a bunch of other people with no wealth. So conflict theorists might say, this isn't going very far at all in solving the problem of inequality in America. And a conflict theorist would say, it's too much of a functionalist approach. A functionalist just want to fix the machine, get it to work better. Whereas a conflict theorist would say this whole capitalist education system is a problem and we need to rethink it. So a lot of liberals, left-wing people might say this is not enough. It's too little, too late. But what does Traub say? So Traub says this thing does work, impact, and both sides need to get over themselves. Instead of calling it tax and spend, Traub says, why not call it investment? Spending money sounds like a waste, but if you're investing in poor people, you're not trying to waste the money, you're trying to grow your money. If you can invest in people so they do better in school and do better in life, then what you might find is they don't go to prison, they don't die young, they don't get sick with all kinds of health problems. So if we're trying to save money as a society and not have to get taxed a lot of money, then taxing people a little bit of money to pay for school is better than taxing them a lot of money later to pay for prisons and healthcares and police and all of the problems that arise when people aren't educated. So paying for education is actually a smart investment, because it's going to save you money down the road in the form of prisons and hospitals and cops and all of that stuff. So it's not wasting money, it's a smart use of money to grow money, to make more money later. And if you could make conservatives see it that way, we're not as a country wasting our money by investing in schools. We're helping our poorest people become more prosperous. And when they're more prosperous, your businesses that hire them will be more prosperous. And you'll do better as business owners because you have employees that are better able to do the job. So if you put it in those kinds of terms, then you could see, hey, it makes sense for me to get taxed a little bit, have the government invest money where it can to make things better for more people in the country. Then we have more people buying products and things and working and not getting sick and all of that, not going to prison. What can you say to liberals, though? Well, you can say, well, personal responsibility isn't such a bad thing, is it? I mean, it's nice to say that the government can help people, but what is it helping people to do? It's helping people to become more personally responsible. If you're investing in people in education, it's so that they can take care of themselves, so that they don't need welfare or prison or, Obamacare or something like that. So that they can take care of themselves and buy their own insurance and invest their own money and save their own money and all that stuff. And so that's, if you don't like government paternalism, if you don't like government acting like a big daddy or big mommy to people, then helping people be their own dad and mom is a good goal. So in other words, liberals should listen to conservatives a little bit and say, yeah, personal responsibility is not a bad thing to want people to be. Let's work on that. And it's not a bad idea for conservatives to listen to liberals and say investing money now so that you save money and make more money later is a really smart idea as a society. So instead of fighting like we keep doing as a country over who gets taxed and how much and where should we spend it, let's, I think, get together and figure out what would be the smart investments of our tax money. I don't know if you've ever invested in the stock market. Me and my sons are doing that right now. And the stock market can be scary because it's not predictable and stuff. Although right now our investment finally is in the red and the black. But what I'm saying is Americans like this idea of like, let's think about how to deploy our money now so that we can make more money later. I think it would be fun for Americans to get together and discuss like, how should we invest our education dollars? What's the best way to do it so we can get a return on our investment later? Instead of talking about it as taxing and spending or handouts or socialism, talk about it as America investing in its future. I like that idea. Anyway, so he says, and that's what Traub is basically saying, these sides need to get past their usual rhetoric and usual, reflex, as a reflex, the way they say, oh, I don't agree with you, that's tax and spend. Oh, I don't agree with you, you're just trying to blame people for their own problems. Let's use new ways of talking about it and figure out how to actually make schools better in our school, in our country. And we can't just keep doing it by focusing on the schools. We have to think about improving other institutions like families and neighborhoods and all of those things. All right, so that's what I had to say about education. And we saw a conflict theory focus on funding as the big problem. We saw a symbolic interactionist approach focusing on the meaning of learning and how we think about it and that being the big problem. And we saw a more functionalist approach looking at the relationship between institutions and how we can get them to function better together. So that's only partially what we could say about education. A lot more we could be talking about. And I was trying to think of like, how could we segue from the topic of education to our next topic, which is cities and the environment. And I just happened to hear on the radio this morning a story that made me see a possible connection. But we're going to cities and the environment, and what really connects these two ideas, and the reason I'm grouping them together, which is really chapters 19 and 20 in our textbook, I grouped them together because of the concept of carbon footprint. But before I get too far into that, I just want to mention this radio story that kind of connects education to cities. I don't know if you've been following, I don't know if you care about baseball or sports or anything, but the city of Oakland is losing their baseball team, the Oakland A's. And the owner wants to take the A's to Las Vegas. But Las Vegas doesn't yet have a stadium for the Oakland A's, so they don't have a place to play next year because they're leaving Oakland, but they're not yet in Las Vegas. So where are they going to play? They're going to play in Sacramento, actually, in the Sacramento River Cats Park. But there's a lot of people angry at the owner of the A's because they don't think that he did what he should have done to keep the A's in Oakland. And a lot of the people in the city of Oakland are really sad and mad to see their team, the Oakland A's, being moved away and just losing this thing that they used to be so proud of. And one of the organizations fighting this is called Schools Not Stadiums. And they're an activist organization. And one of the ideas I want to end this class on too is that it's possible to make society better. We started with sociological imagination, and we've learned about a lot of problems in our society over the course of this term, but sociology is also about taking action to fix your society. And this one group, Schools Not Stadiums, is challenging the Oakland A's, and one of their claims is, what this billionaire owner of the A's is trying to do is say, I'll go to whichever city will build me a stadium. If they'll put up, hundreds of millions of dollars to build a baseball stadium, then I will move my team there. And so cities are having to use their tax money, the money you pay in taxes, to build stadiums. And some groups are saying, what benefit is it to our city if we build stadiums for our billionaires so they can make more money with sports teams instead of investing like in schools, like we just talked about? Billions of dollars could really help cities improve their schools and, do much better than they've been doing. But if you just put the money into sports, what are you doing for society? I mean, some might claim you're telling young people what really matters in America is throwing a ball and hitting a ball and being a sports guy, not schools, not learning how to do all kinds of stuff like be a nurse or a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer or something like that. And you're also just taking resources that the city has collected from its citizens and giving it to something that benefits the wealthiest people. I mean, the guy who owns the team is among the wealthiest in the country, and the people who can afford to go see baseball games are people with extra time and money on their hands. If you're a working family trying to put food on your table for your 3 kids, then maybe a baseball stadium isn't the most important thing you would like your tax money spent on. But this question of how do cities decide what to build or not build, and who gets to decide it, and how does it affect your daily life, is what the sociology of cities is all about, or urban sociology. But I also want to connect that with another topic, which is the sociology of the environment. And a good way to connect those is to ask you, well, how did you get here today? How many of you walked? How many of you rode your bike? How many of you took public transportation, like a bus? Good job. How many of you came here by yourself in your own car? Everybody, well, pretty much. And that's because you hate planet Earth, right? You just hate planet Earth. You're like, F planet Earth, I'm driving my car. No, I don't think you do. I think you're good people that love planet Earth and want to save it for future generations. But you do have a big carbon footprint. What is a carbon footprint? Well, when we try to figure out what global warming is, I'm sure you already know about global warming, but maybe you don't. Or climate change, whatever you want to call it nowadays. The big question is, what are we going to do about it? I don't want to even entertain the idea that it may or may not be happening. That's a conspiracy theory that the oil industry has tried to get you to believe, that there is no global warming, it's fine, everything's good, don't worry about it. But all the world scientists who aren't working for the oil industry will tell you that's not true, that we have a serious problem on our hands, and if your generation doesn't do something about it, or if we don't do something about it soon, your generation and subsequent ones are gonna really be facing some tough situations. We're already facing them. California you can't get your house insured anymore in California because the risk of wildfire is so high that insurance companies don't even wanna pay for that here in the state. So that's a structural problem. If you can't get your house insured and you're like required by law to have your house insured if you own one, then the whole basis of our economy, private property and all that, is in doubt. So anyway, whether or not you believe in global warming, the consequences of it are already here and people are already trying to deal with it. And a good question to ask is, what can we do about it? It's going to take global cooperation. So, global problems are what we have nowadays. The next class after sociology 1 is sociology 2, which is called social problems. And traditionally that class, social problems, just focuses on one country, like what are America's social problems? And we would focus on things like education and crime and homelessness and all of that stuff. But if you're really a good sociologist nowadays on planet Earth, you have to be asking what are the social problems that the global humanity faces? We can't really just think of problems anymore as just one country's problems. Like we can't, as America, solve global warming, nor can China, nor can Russia. They have to somehow work together to solve a global problem. And so global problems require global cooperation and technological change. But it's been really hard to get the countries of the world to begin to even cooperate on this topic. And I don't know how much time to spend on why that is, but who has the biggest carbon footprint? So maybe if you haven't heard these terms before. So global warming is caused because of the release of carbon is creating what's called a greenhouse gas effect in our atmosphere. These gases accumulate, they get trapped by our atmosphere, and so like a greenhouse, it gets hotter and hotter and hotter, and we can't cool it down like the Earth can't cool itself down the way it used to. And the big cause of carbon for humans is burning of oil and fossil fuels. And so when we talk about carbon footprint, we're talking about how much do you personally, how much carbon are you responsible for each year? But we can also measure carbon footprint by country. So if we ask, well, who has the biggest carbon footprint? Well, China does nowadays. If we ask which country is releasing the most carbon into the atmosphere, it's China. But US is close behind. Second is USA. And what do you notice? What's a big difference between China and the USA that you can think of? Population. China's way bigger in terms of population. So China has like over 1 billion people. And we have about 300 million. And our carbon footprints are pretty close. I'm not getting into the details of it. But if 300 million people are producing basically as much carbon as 1 billion people, that tells you that your per capita, so in terms of overall, China, but in terms of per capita carbon footprint, meaning each person, we are the leaders. Americans are the biggest polluters per person. So USA by far is number 1. Yay! USA number 1. But I don't know if we're happy about that. And when I ask you, like, well, how did you get here? You did the most maximally carbon producing thing you could do, which is get in a car and drive here. And it would have been better if you walked or biked or something like that, or took public transportation. But why didn't you? Is it a personal choice? Are you a bad person? Are you hate planet Earth? Are you a selfish, greedy effer? Sorry. No, I don't think you are. So what explains then why you drove your car here?
It's far away.
It's far away. Who decided to put Yuba College way out here on the end of Northfield Road and all the housing where people live in Marysville, Yuba City, the housing isn't near the college. Northfield Road is a big road that's called a strip. Have you ever tried being a pedestrian on Northfield Road? Good luck with that. They've recently changed Northfield Road, so now they have a median with trees on it. It used to be just one big wide road that if you were trying to cross it on foot, you were going to get killed. In fact, Northfield Road has the highest pedestrian fatality rate of any road in the county because people try to get across it and they get hit. And so they kept trying to do things to make it safer, like Putting a median makes it safer because then you only have to cross one set of lanes of traffic and then you can wait and then go to the next one. There's a lot of things that were done and that we'll talk about to make Northfield Road friendlier, smarter is what we're going to talk about. Smart growth as opposed to dumb growth. But decisions were made is what I'm getting at back in the 90s. So when was Northfield Road created? When was Yuba College put out here? Decisions were made back in the 40s and 50s about how to arrange cities. And in a lot of cases in the United States, the way cities were laid out makes it so that you as a person pretty much have to drive. Whether you want to or not, whether you want to care about the planet Earth, it's almost impossible not to have a car to get around in America, and especially in California. And so if we sit here saying we care about the environment, but we all sit there and get in our cars and drive by ourselves, then that, there's a mismatch there between what we care about or say we care about and what we're actually doing. So thinking about how our cities develop and why they are the way they are helps us understand environmental questions that we're facing. And so to talk about it, I want to focus on a problem that cities face in California especially. Another thing I like to do towards the end of the semester is get you to think locally, or get you to think globally but act locally. That used to be a bumper sticker a lot of people had. But it's hard to worry about the global problems and like who can do anything about them. But if you think about them locally, you can do things about your local community. And in doing things about your local community, you're actually helping humanity deal with the global things. And so I like to think about Marysville and Yuba City and how we live around here and why things are the way they are, and think about how they contribute to these larger issues. And so urban sprawl is the topic that helps us think these things through. What is urban sprawl? I want to give you some pictures of it. Let's see. So let's see, that's not what I'm trying to show you. That's my notes, but where was I? Here, I'll just do this. So, I'm trying to show you some pictures of urban sprawl. That's a pretty good picture of it. You know where that is? What city does that look like to you? How about this one? Same one. They just told us what it is. It's LA. LA is basically human city as far as you can see. See that down there? That's downtown LA, those little buildings down there. And the rest of it is all sprawled out. To sprawl out a city is to make it go horizontally across the landscape, whereas vertical growth, or more dense growth it's called, tends to be more vertical. So like the city of Los Angeles is kind of the capital of urban sprawl in the United States. It's a huge area that you could walk for days and not leave the sprawl. When would you know you're not in sprawl? Well, when you're in open space where there's nature or farmland or something other than sidewalks and buildings and concrete and stuff like that, development. And so LA is a place that has out of control sprawl, and it actually is a problem now because it can't sprawl anymore. And Sacramento area, if we think of our region, we live in what's called the Sacramento area. And the Sacramento area hasn't yet sprawled to the extent that Los Angeles has. If you were to get up into the foothills and look out over our valley, because this is looking out over the San Fernando Valley of Los Angeles. And if we were to look out over the Sacramento Valley from the foothills, we wouldn't see all sprawl, would we? We would see some green, some blue from water sources. We would see, you know, some farmland that might be brown or whatever, rolling hills that are brown. I mean, you would see some nature, but you definitely could see the beginnings of sprawl in that you would see places like Lincoln and Rockland, especially if you could see it over time lapse, over 20 years. Folsom, El Dorado, Natomas, these areas of the valley. And you could even mention Yuba City. This whole Yuba City, Marysville area is sprawling, growing. Plumas Lake, in other words, developments have sprawled outward from the core city. So you used to have Marysville, Yuba City. They were right next to each other on a little river. And now it's all this big thing that spreads out all over the place. And so why is that a problem? What a lot of people up here don't want to become is LA. And I want to make the case to you that you don't want this to be LA. I'm a transplant from Southern California. I was just telling my kids, I don't even want to move down there anymore. I mean, I much prefer it up here where it's not yet totally sprawled out. So why is that? So I'm drawing on a report here that's called When Sprawl Hits the Wall. That was a report about Los Angeles. And so I'm just going to kind of follow their logic or their argument. So sprawl hits the wall. So Los Angeles can't sprawl anymore. It is Los Angeles isn't just one valley, really. When we talk about Los Angeles, what are we talking about? How big is Los Angeles? What is the Los Angeles area? What is the Sacramento area? When we talk about Sacramento, we're talking about 5 counties, really, not just Sacramento County. We're talking about the Sacramento County, we're talking about Yolo County, El Dorado County, Sutter County, Placer County, sometimes might even include Yuba County in there. It's a set of counties that are all really tied together into one place. There's multiple cities in that place and multiple counties, but it's really one place. Same with Los Angeles. When you say I'm going to go down to Los Angeles, you don't always mean the city of Los Angeles. Like if you go to Magic Mountain, people say, I'm going to Magic Mountain, that's Los Angeles. But it's not in Los Angeles, it's in Santa Clarita Valley, it's in whatever town that is. But we just call it all Los Angeles. And in our experience, that makes sense. I mean, it's just this one place that's big, but we call it Los Angeles. But how big is Los Angeles? You know, the Los Angeles area. It's really, the term, one of the key terms I can give you is it's a megalopolis. That's a kind of new term that we have in the sociology of cities. We used to call cities metropolises, like Superman lives in the city of Metropolis, isn't it him? Or is it Batman? Anyway, the city of Metropolis, the word metropolis means city. But a megalopolis is a new idea. It's a city of cities. And today we can't really just focus on cities themselves in the political sense. Like the city of Sacramento isn't just its own thing. It's connected with the cities of Rockland and Roseville and Marysville and Yuba City and El Dorado and Folsom and Auburn and all these places it's connected with. And so really we could call it a city of cities, this megalopolis area. And if you really want to get regional about it, the whole Bay Area is a megalopolis. And it goes from San Francisco all the way out to Sacramento. And when we say it's all one place, why do we call it one place? Well, there's a lot of people actually that live in Yuba County who work in San Francisco or San Jose or places like that. So they live in one place, but they work in another. Their commute spans that whole area. So you could say their lifestyle takes place in this huge megalopolis that's the whole Northern California region, basically, is one urban area. Same with LA, though almost the whole Southern California is like one urban area, more and more. How many in LA? How many cities? Well, first of all, LA is 5 counties too. It's Ventura County, Los Angeles County, Orange County, San Bernardino County, and I think I'm missing one other one. And it's all part of one area, one region, we could call it. 5 counties. How many cities do you think? How many cities in those 5 counties make up the LA area? Take a wild guess.
25.
200. 200 cities. A lot of them are cities you've never heard of. And that's part of the story I want to tell. Why are there so many cities in LA? There's cities like Hawaiian Gardens is the city I used to go to. The City of Industry is a city down there. Commerce is a city down there. There's cities that you haven't really heard of because no one lives in them. No one lives in the City of Industry or Commerce, really. That's why they're called in City of Industry and Commerce, but they're cities. And what is a city? Well, a city is a political entity that has like a mayor, city council. It's incorporated. It has government that can call itself a city. And so why are there 200 cities in LA? And what we mean by sprawl is kind of unplanned growth. The opposite of sprawl is what we call smart growth. So sprawl versus smart growth is another way to think about what we're talking about here. Sprawl is like unplanned growth. It's decentralized planning, so that's the term I'm looking for here. So in LA, having 200 cities means that you don't just have one government sort of deciding how to run this huge area. You have 200 separate governments deciding those things. And why do you have so many? So it's decentralized, meaning 200 separate decision-making centers and kind of competing with each other over the decision-making rather than working together to make good, smart decisions about how to run this area. And it happened because of developer-driven growth. What's a developer? You know any famous developers, real estate developers out there these days? Any ones that are on trial right now in New York City? Donald Trump is a famous real estate developer. That's the guy who was former president, probably going to be president again, it's looking like, in the United States. He's a real estate developer. What is a real estate developer? Have you ever played the game Monopoly? That's a fun game. In that game, what you're being is a real estate developer. What they do is they buy pieces of land and then they try to develop stuff on the land. You try to put homes and then hotels on your land, and by putting that stuff on your land, you make it more valuable, and then you try to sell it later for more money. And that's how you can get rich, and you can get very influential. I mean, developer is an interesting job for some business people because you're not just making money, you're helping to decide what kind of place people live and what kind of buildings they see. And are they going to see a big Trump Tower with your name on it, or are they going to see nice fields with nobody's name on it? I mean, what are they going to have in their city? And if developers are the ones deciding stuff, that's what LA did, was kind of allow its businessmen, its developers, its Trumps, to decide how the city should go. And what do developers, what are they interested in? What is Donald Trump trying to do when he builds a Trump Tower? Make money. I mean, if your goal is to make money, then that's gonna drive certain decisions that aren't necessarily the best decisions in terms of having a good city. I mean, if a developer wants to make money, he will build certain things that make him money, like a baseball stadium. Is that the one thing the city needs most, is a baseball stadium, or is that the thing that a billionaire guy that wants to make even more money thinks is a great idea? If you ask all the school children and all the people that don't have parks to play in, what do you guys need? If they say, well, we need schools and parks and a nearby clinic and stuff. Nah, we're gonna build a stadium. Developers want things that are basically short-term profit. You try to buy something and quickly flip it. that's the term they use in the real estate industry, and there's even shows about that. I want to buy a piece of land, flip it, and try to make more money than I paid for it. And it's a fun game to play, or Americans like following that game. But if that's driving your growth, you won't necessarily end up with the best place to live. For example, building, one thing developers like to build are what are called single-family homes. Homes that people want to buy and call their own home. But if you only build single-family homes, what you're not building is apartment buildings. And if you don't build apartment buildings, then people who don't have enough money to buy a home don't have housing available to rent. And we have like serious housing problems in California with a lot of homeless people who can't afford rent. And one reason they can't afford rent is because we never build enough apartment buildings. Well, why don't we build apartment buildings? Because those aren't profitable in the short term. If you're trying to make a bunch of money, then like KB Homes, like Kaufman and Broad, you buy a bunch of virgin farmland, a bunch of land that doesn't have anything on it. And then you plant a bunch of houses that look just like each other on that land. And then you sell each one for $750,000 real quick. And within a few years, you can turn a bunch of cheap farmland into millions and millions of dollars. And yeah, you built a bunch of homes like Plumas Lake. A lot of those homes, I own one of them, weren't built well. We just had a whole leak problem. We have tenants living there, and they're like, yeah, there's all this mold growing out of the wall. And we're like, oh, what happened? And there was like a leak inside the wall and mold growing, and that was because they used these special kind of plastic water pipes on those homes that aren't good, and if they corrode, and so a bunch of the homes in the neighborhood are all leaking. Well, the developer's long gone, nobody can do anything about that. He made their millions. So they're short-term profit. Build houses, don't necessarily build the best quality houses. Don't worry too much about the wildlife and other things you're displacing. Just build it and leave. In LA, that happened to a huge extent. Developers built stuff and then made money when people moved into them. Why did they do that? I'm trying to remember my notes here. It's been a while since I gave this lecture, and I don't want to skip anything. Let's see, where was it? Oh. Okay. Yeah. So another key idea here that pertains to a lot of places and not just Los Angeles. So you have these developers wanting to build stuff, and as developers like to say, if you build it, they will come. But they might not. I mean, that happens sometimes too. You build a whole housing development and nobody buys any of the homes. So another process had to happen to create the LA that we now know. And that process we can call suburbanization. What's a suburb? Well, through most of the 20th century, so like before World War II, most people lived in cities. And if you lived in a city, you probably lived in a kind of vertical situation. I was talking about this earlier. New York City is the capital of dense development as opposed to sprawled development. Like New York City has as many people as Los Angeles, but it's on a little tiny island. You can walk from the one end of Manhattan to the other in a few hours. But walking from one end of LA to the other will take you several days. So New York grows vertically. You live in these big tall buildings in New York City rather than living all spread out. And that's how most people used to live in America. They lived in these big urban areas or, in vertical sort of situations in apartment buildings. But in the middle part of the 20th century, we talked a little bit about it earlier, people began to move out of the cities and into their own single-family homes. And there were economic reasons for suburbanization. I'm trying to remember my notes here. So, oh yeah, okay, there it is. Thank you. So like I said, in the middle part of the 20th century, people began to leave America's cities. This is known as the time of the Great Migration. The Great Migration is when lots of black people and brown people moved from the south to the north. So you had Puerto Ricans and Mexicans moving up from those places into the United States. You had people from the south, black people from the southern states moving into the northern states. And why did this all go on? So one of the reasons is economic reasons. And a big thing was returning GIs. We talked about the GI Bill earlier in this class. So 1945, post-World War II period, when World War II ended in 1945, that's when the suburbanization really got going in the United States. And there were economic reasons. All of these 2 million soldiers returning, 2 million guys coming back from the war. And as we talked about earlier in this class, that was a social problem in itself, is figuring out how can we reintegrate 2 million men back into our society in a smooth way so that they won't be causing problems, because these are guys that have probably had PTSD and they've been killing people for 5 years, and how are we going to get them back into America? And remember, the GI Bill gave them money. It gave them money to buy homes or go to college or both. It gave them each like $100,000. 2 million soldiers wanted homes, and the American government wanted people to start buying their own homes. Remember, we said there was this effort to grow the middle class, to create a whole new economy, not one based on war and employing people as soldiers or as building weapons and bombs, but a new consumer economy of people buying their own homes and buying all the things that you need for your home, your refrigerators, your washing machines, your curtains, your couches. And so America made a decision for economic reasons to say, let's grow the middle class. Let's give these 2 million guys lots of money to go buy their own homes and go to college, and they will start being the new consumers. This is when the baby boom happened. We talk about baby boomers now. Well, these were people born between 1945 and 1964 or so. It's called a baby boom because a lot more babies got born during this period than ever before in America. And a lot of it is a result of this GI Bill, of bringing back 2 million guys and making them very marriageable, giving them money to buy homes and go to college. And women wanted to marry them. They were heroes coming back from World War II, and they had money. And they started forming families and having babies. And suburbs began to grow up to house all these people. Long Beach, where I used to teach, is a good example of it because that's a place where people were getting off the boats. The boats were bringing guys back from Europe. Thousands of soldiers coming back. And as soon as they get off the boats, they would get handed these advertisements. Hey, you can buy your own home. Oh, you just got $100,000 from the government? You can put a down payment on a brand new home here in Lakewood, where there was a whole bunch of little towns around the coast of Southern California. Orange County is another example. Places where cheap homes were being built. Small little single family units. They usually had 2 bedrooms. They had a little separate garage for your car and just a 2-bedroom home. And there's millions of these, or thousands of them, all over Los Angeles. Most people nowadays, if they buy one of those 2-bedroom homes, turn it into, remodel it into 4- and 5-bedroom homes. But back then the model was, you have a small family, you have a wife and a husband and a baby, and they need a little 2-bedroom starter home. And they were cheaply made. Like at one point in Long Beach, they were building 1,000 homes a week. I don't know if you've seen some of the development around here. It goes pretty fast. Like you see a farm field, and a few months later, it's a bunch of houses. And that's like what they were doing all over Los Angeles at that time, building tons of new homes for these new soldiers. And there were other places in the country where this was going on, where deliberately new communities were created to house all these young families that were getting started. Levittown is a famous example. But these communities, were largely white. I mean, that was another decision the government made, was let's build this middle class with mainly white people and not be giving big home, not be encouraging Black people and Latino people to buy their own homes. So we still have a problem in the country of intergenerational wealth, where a lot of white families still have home ownership and multiple generations of home ownership, whereas a lot of Black and Latino families still haven't bought their first home. But anyway, this is when the suburbs grew. And the government needed this to happen. The government consciously wanted to grow the middle class, as we talked about, to help save capitalism. And getting a bunch of young families into their own homes, buying their own stuff for their homes, was a way to embrace a new consumer capitalism where everybody gets to enjoy the good life. In fact, that's the cultural reasons. Why did people want to go buy homes in the suburbs? I mean, it's one thing to build it and hope they'll come, but people had to be persuaded that this new lifestyle was a better lifestyle. In other words, there was a new definition of the good life. Good life is kind of a shorthand phrase for success. How do you know that you're a successful person in America? What is the sign of success? What do we use to decide who's successful and who's not? Well, before World War II, in the older period, there was a different definition than now. Before, the definition was much more urban. And did you guys ever watch I Love Lucy? Who in here has ever watched I Love Lucy? You guys don't know that show? I Love Lucy, it's an important show. I think Americans should care more about it. Because it was one of the very first TV shows in America. And it was about a white lady married to a Latino dude. And he was a Latino, entertainer. And she's a housewife, but she really wishes she could be an entertainer. Anyway, so it really dealt with, interracial issues, gender issues, all kinds of issues. And it was right at the very beginning of the television era in America. Anyway, but in I Love Lucy, at the beginning of that show, which was in the early 50s, they lived in New York City, and they lived on the top floor of their, what's called a penthouse apartment, the best apartment in the building. Ricky, the husband, is an entertainer, so he's got money. Lucy, is living the good life of being a housewife, with help to take care of her kids and her husband and all of that. But once they have kids, they decide to move to the suburbs. They decide to go out of the city and go live in New Jersey or someplace like that. And that transition was happening all over America, and it all kind of has to do with TV. In other words, this new idea was you don't need to live in a city to be a successful person. What you want to do is live in a house by yourself, a private home, not with a bunch of other families. And you don't need to go out in the city to fancy entertainment like Ricky Ricardo, with live clubs and live music. You just need to go to your living room and turn on your TV, because the TV was this new invention in the early 50s. And this is the same time that the suburbs were being created. And so TV was this new idea that you don't need to live in a city. You can just stay in your own home in the suburbs and be fully connected to the world and see great entertainment. And you can also have a backyard with a grill, and you can have your friends over for barbecues and to swim in your pool. You don't need to live in a city in a fancy apartment wearing fancy clothes all day and riding fancy cars. You can just wear flip-flops and Bermuda shorts and drink beer with your neighbors and grill your food. It was this new American model of happiness and success. It wasn't the urban model, but the suburban model. So not urban cities, but suburban, outside the city, in your own home. That was the new model. And TV was the medium that promoted this lifestyle. That's what all the shows were about families living in the suburbs. So even I Love Lucy became that. But other shows that we think of the 1950s, like Leave It to Beaver and Father Knows Best, and they were shows about families with a father that's in charge of things, living in the suburbs. And how did you learn about these families? By watching them on a TV in the suburbs, with your family. And so it was kind of showing to the public too how to be a successful American. And you need to have these nice furniture like they have, and the nice curtains like she has, and the happy kids like they have. In other words, it was painting a new model of happiness in America. and trying to convince people, like my family is a good example. My parents grew up in New York City, very urban people. They thought anybody living out the city was dumb and slow. And then they moved to Chicago originally when they were a young couple with kids. And eventually they decided, let's move to California and go live in Southern California in our own home. Let's leave behind the apartment building, the snow and the cars, and go live in Santa Barbara, where my dad started wearing sandals and shorts all the time, and just even he was a teacher and just teaching in shorts and sandals. I mean, it was a whole new lifestyle that was promoted in the West. I mean, that was part of it too, was California, where the TV industry and the movie industry were based, where the industry is telling the rest of the country, you're not really happy there on the East Coast in these big cities with all the crime and coldness. Come to the West and live in your own home in a big place like LA. So people started coming, in other words. They built the homes and people started coming, and California began to fill up with people in the 50s and 60s and 70s. But a lot of other suburbs, if people couldn't make it all the way to California, they would leave their cities and go live in the suburbs around the city. So if you couldn't leave Chicago completely, you could go to like the suburbs of Chicago. Or if you couldn't leave Detroit completely, you could go to Grosse Pointe or these other nice neighborhoods outside of the city. And so many Americans all over the country began to leave the cities. And there were economic reasons that the industry was promoting this. And the TV industry would work together with the real estate industry. In other words, the real estate industry had a bunch of homes to sell. And so they would actually sponsor TV shows. They would actually say, let's make a TV show about people selling their home in the city, like the Beverly Hillbillies or something, and going to the West, going to live out there and, living out there. But that wasn't a good example of Beverly Hillbillies. But there was other examples of people leaving the city. Well, another good example was a show called Green Acres, about a couple, and she loves the city, but he doesn't. He wants to be a farmer. He wants to live on a big farm, and she wants to live in the big city. So how do they compromise? We live in the suburbs in a house with a big yard. And so he can pretend he's a farmer, and she can still be connected to the city and shopping and all that stuff. So it was this new lifestyle that was really promoted in America. And it was consciously done by the real estate industry to help promote selling of houses. And the real estate industry was supported by other industries, especially the car industry. So the car industry also knew if everybody lives in their own homes, spread out all over the place, then they will need cars to get from one place to another. And so this whole new lifestyle is a great way to sell cars. And it wasn't only TV that was promoting this. Radio songs all started to become about cars, and how see the USA in your Chevrolet, or all these songs about Fords and Chevys, and really glorifying the idea that a car is a great thing to have, and you will be a really happy American and a really free American when you have a car and you can get in your car and drive all over the US wherever you want to go. And then come back to your nice home and whatever. And so it was a whole new lifestyle being promoted that the industries of America, the auto industry, the real estate industry, the furniture industries, the appliance industries, all were kind of working together to promote this new consumer lifestyle of spending money and making yourself happy through all this spending. But there was a more sinister reason too why people wanted to leave the cities and migrate to the suburbs. And it's also a cultural reason, but it's not so much the American dream idea and suburbanization, it's what sociologists call white flight. It was mainly white people leaving the cities. And who was moving into cities? Well, actually, brown and black people were moving into some of America's northern cities, like New York and Chicago and Detroit. And they were coming up, why? Because of what we talked about earlier, because of World War II. All the white guys had gone off to fight in World War II, and the government needed people to work in the factories of the cities to build the weapons and the bombs and all of that, and the ships. And so people were invited. Brown and black people from the South and from southern countries like Mexico were invited to America and to the northern cities to come work in the factories. Women too. That's where we get Rosie the Riveter. Women were expected to just stay home before this, but now they were being called, hey, come, we need your help, come build in the factories. And once you started having women and non-white people working in good factory jobs, America wasn't really the same after that. But white people some of them began to say, hey, these neighborhoods that we live in don't feel like our neighborhood anymore. The Puerto Ricans are moving in, the Black people are moving in, the Mexicans are moving in. So where are we gonna go? Let's leave the city and go to these new suburbs that are opening up, that the government is encouraging white people to go buy into. And so you had this influx of brown and Black people into cities and this outflux of white people into the suburbs. And Orange County is a good example of everything I'm talking about. Orange County, why is it called Orange County? Because it used to be orange fields, it was farmland. And very quickly, in the post-World War II period, all those farmland orange groves got plowed under and new housing developments built. And very sprawled out ones, so single-family homes, not tall buildings. So if you look out over Orange County, like where Disneyland is, Anaheim, and places like that, it's very, spread out. And it's known as a very white place, or at least until recently. It was like the capital of Republican conservatism in the United States. Places like Huntington Beach are known for like neo-Nazis and white supremacists, and Costa Mesa and places like that. Was a very white place for many years. And it was because white people were moving there from all over the country, really, coming from places like Chicago and Detroit and New York to go live in sunny Southern California in these new housing developments. And so it became a very white area. And the certain ethnic neighborhoods, or certain neighborhoods of New York. And by the way, what we really mean, especially are white ethnics. So we mean people like Italian Americans, and Irish Americans, and Jewish Americans. These were groups that themselves were migrants to the United States not that long before. So they are not the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants that originally were part of what Weber called the Calvinist groups that first created the United States. They were new arrivals, and at first they weren't always considered white, as we talked about. We talked about racial formation. Italians weren't considered white when they came. Irish people weren't considered white. Jews weren't considered white. But now that they were owning their own home, or had the ability to own their own homes, and were getting more integrated into American life, these white ethnics began to see themselves and be considered more as just white people, and therefore not wanting to mix with or be in the same neighborhoods with other ethnic groups like Black people and Mexican people and other newer immigrants. So that's what we mean by white flight, and LA is an example of that, and a lot of the other cities too. The suburbs filled up with white people, whereas the cities themselves, the urban areas, stayed more brown and Black. And we still have a lot of that in America, where we think of the urban people as the brown and Black people, and we think of the suburban people as the more white bread in the literal sense. All right, well, we'll talk to you more about this on Thursday.
Bye.
Bye, have a good one.
See you Thursday.
Okay, take care, be good.
Thank you. Later.
Later, good luck. article. Nice, workers one.
where the ball's released, not where you think where. That's what you too, dude.